All right, so we're diving back into Underground to Canada.
Back into it.
Picking up with Julianne Liza in Chapter 14, right after that intense escape from the slave auction. If you remember,
It was a close one.
they're pushing north through the mountains, trying to reach the Ohio River.
Yep, towards freedom.
Ultimately Canada, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But today,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to go a little bit deeper than just
the plot point.
the plot point.
Yeah, we're going to uncover all those layers of meaning
Exactly.
that Barbara Smucker packed into this
Oh, yeah.
crucial part of the story.
It's a big one.
Yeah, what's really striking is how Smucker uses the mountain landscape almost to mirror the girl's emotional state, you know?
Oh, interesting.
It's dangerous, it's unpredictable.
Right.
It's like they're navigating not just the physical terrain, but their own fear and uncertainty, too.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So it's more than just a setting then, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We get these really vivid descriptions, treacherous paths, wild animals, and then
and then that storm hits.
that sudden violent storm.
It's like the mountain itself is testing their will to survive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, and she has these lines like, you know, the paths were slim as the string bind in a cotton bale.
Oh, yeah.
It makes you feel how precarious their situation is.
Right.
That one wrong step could be disastrous.
Totally.
And the storm, she compares it to a slave owner's whip. It's visceral. You almost feel the lash alongside the girls.
It's powerful.
It is.
It's really powerful.
Yeah,
It makes you wonder, how would you keep going
Right.
under that kind of pressure?
Exactly.
Soaked, exhausted, every shadow feels like a threat.
It really speaks to that deep resilience, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The will to survive that humans have.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then, in the middle of all this hardship,
Yeah.
Smucker gives us this moment of incredible generosity.
Oh, the old man with the cart.
Yes.
I get chills every time I reread that scene.
Me too. So powerful. He's so clearly burdened himself, right? Likely enslaved, too.
Right.
Yet he offers them his only food, directions, a moment of rest.
I know.
It's such a huge contrast to the cruelty they've known.
And it really makes you think about the bonds that people formed under slavery.
Right.
Like this system designed to dehumanize, to break spirits. Yet here's this man risking his own well-being.
Absolutely.
For strangers.
For strangers. It's unbelievable.
It really highlights that even in oppression, humanity finds a way to persist.
Right.
This wasn't just about individual survival.
Right.
But about communities looking out for each other however they could.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then we come to another turning point in the story.
Okay.
The railroad tracks.
The Iron Road.
The Iron Road, yeah.
Yeah.
And they become this literal and symbolic guide for Julie and Liza.
It's brilliant layering, isn't it?
It is.
On the surface, the tracks are their path north.
But they also embody hope, this relentless push towards freedom that the railroad itself represents.
Yeah.
At the time, I mean, that's...
Yeah, exactly. And do you remember when that train thunders past them?
Oh, yeah.
It's not just noise. It's like the power and speed of the freedom that they're chasing made tangible.
Right.
It must have been terrifying, but also exhilarating.
Exactly. But then Smucker reminds us that trust is a fragile thing on this journey.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
That encounter with the man in the cornfield.
Oh, right.
He's so wary, almost paranoid.
It's such a contrast to the old man.
I know, right?
He actually warns them against Jeb Brown.
I know.
Who we know becomes, like, crucial to their escape.
It's wild.
Yeah.
But it reminds us that the response to slavery was complex, even within the Black community.
Right.
Not everyone could risk being involved in the Underground Railroad. The dangers were too great.
Of course.
Yeah.
So you had this whole spectrum of responses.
Right.
From active resistance to cautious self-preservation. Exactly. And each person weighing their own risks, making these difficult choices.
Tough choices.
And it makes the girl's journey even more suspenseful.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Who can they truly trust?
Yeah, who's going to help? Who might betray them?
And speaking of trust, when they finally reach Jeb Brown's cabin,
Yes.
it's like stepping into a safe haven.
It is.
The password, the secret room behind the cupboard.
Behind the cupboard.
I know, it all feels so clandestine.
So cool.
I know, what's so fascinating is the level of ingenuity and precaution built into the Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
Like these hidden rooms, code words, they highlight the constant threat those involved lived under.
Yeah. It's a whole other world.
It is, and yet you get this sense of warmth from Jeb and Ella,
Right.
instantly making the girls feel like family.
Oh.
It's such a stark contrast to the anxiety they've been carrying.
Exactly. It shows the dual nature of the Underground Railroad, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
You know, the need for secrecy, constant vigilance, but also the immense compassion driving it.
So it's not just about hiding.
No.
It's about creating these pockets of humanity within this inhumane system.
Absolutely.
And with Cheb, we see the Underground Railroad becoming more organized.
Right.
It's not just individual acts of kindness anymore.
Yeah.
It's like a network operating with this clear purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And he explains it all, right?
Yeah, at least lays it out.
He lays it out. Like
Yeah.
the stations, the tracks, those code words like freight and hardware used to describe escaping people.
I know.
It's like Julie, Helly, and Liza are getting this crash course in resistance.
I love that. Crash course in resistance, yeah.
And this knowledge is powerful.
Right.
They're no longer just running blindly.
Right.
They're part of something larger.
Yes.
And that realization must have been both daunting and incredibly empowering.
Oh, absolutely. It's a turning point for them.
It is.
For sure.
And then comes the news about Lester and Adam.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That they escaped. That they endured those awful chains and injuries and are likely in Canada.
Talk about a morale boost.
Right.
It reaffirms that escape is possible.
Yes.
That the risks they're taking are worth it.
Right.
But it also underscores the sacrifices others have made to reach freedom.
They've literally borne the scars
Yes.
of their fight for freedom.
Absolutely.
And it sets the stage for what awaits Julie and Liza.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Journey is far from over.
No, it's just beginning in a way.
It is.
Yeah.
Speaking of which,
Yeah.
their next destination
Yes.
is Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Specifically, Levi Coffin.
Levi Coffin.
This is where things get really interesting.
And undone. Levi Coffin. Now there's a name that carries weight in the story of the Underground Railroad.
Sending Julie and Liza to him, it isn't just the next stop.
Right.
It's like they're being ushered into the inner circle
The inner circle.
of the abolitionist movement.
Yeah, it's like a whole nother level, right?
That feels like a real turning point, yeah.
It is.
We've been talking about these individual acts of courage, hidden networks, but Coffin represents something
bigger. Yeah, much bigger.
more organized.
He was known as the president of the Underground Railroad
Yeah.
for a reason.
And Jeb even says Levi Coffin is a Quaker, but he's no ordinary Quaker. He's a man with power and money and the heart to use both against slavery.
Oh, I love that line.
It almost sounds like a legend,
It does.
like a figure too good to be true.
There's a reason his home was called the Grand Central Station of the Underground Railroad.
Wow,
Thousands of escaping slaves passed through his doors in Cincinnati.
that's amazing.
He was a conductor, a provider, a political force, all rolled into one.
It makes me think about the risks involved, though.
Oh, yeah.
If he was so well known,
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't that make him a target
Oh, absolutely.
for slave catchers, for pro-slavery forces?
For sure, operating in Cincinnati, right on the border between North and South.
Right.
The tension was constant.
It must be.
Coffin faced legal challenges, threats, even attempts to burn down his home.
Wow.
But he was unwavering in his commitment.
That's incredible. It must have taken so much courage.
Right.
Not just for Coffin,
Not just for him.
but for everyone involved in the Underground Railroad.
Everyone.
We see that even with Jeb and Ella, the precautions they took, the fear they lived with,
Constant fear.
it's hard to imagine.
And yet they persisted. That's what makes this chapter so powerful.
It really does.
It highlights this complex web of individuals,
Yeah.
resources, safe houses, all working together to defy this unjust system.
It's inspiring.
It is.
Smucker does such a great job of showing how the Underground Railroad evolved, right?
She does.
From those early desperate acts of helping individuals escape
Right.
to this network with routes, codes, leaders like Coffin at the helm.
It's a reminder that resistance takes many forms.
It really does.
Sometimes it's a whispered word, a shared meal.
Right.
Other times it's organized defiance on a grand scale.
And both were essential
And both were essential.
to the fight against slavery.
Absolutely. But let's not forget,
Yeah.
while Coffin represents this organized effort, the heart of the story is still Julie and Liza's personal journey.
Right.
What do you think their arrival in Cincinnati would have felt like for them?
I imagine it would have been overwhelming.
Right.
They've come from this rural isolation, constant fear.
To this bustling city,
Yeah.
center of abolitionist activity.
Imagine that mix of emotions.
Oh, yeah.
Hope, anxiety, maybe even a sense of disbelief that they've made it this far.
And especially after hearing about Lester and Adam.
Oh, of course.
Knowing they likely reached Canada.
It must have been a huge motivator,
Huge.
but also a reminder of
Right.
the danger still ahead.
Exactly, and Smucker leaves us with that anticipation.
She does.
Will Coffin be able to help them?
Right.
What new challenges will they face in Cincinnati?
It's like a cliffhanger.
It is. It's
Yeah.
a turning point of the novel in many ways.
I think so, too. It's like they've graduated from one level
From one level
of the Underground
or
Railroad
another,
to another,
complex.
a potentially more perilous one,
Yeah,
but also one that offers a glimmer of real hope.
a glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, how would this exposure to the wider abolitionist movement have shaped Julie and Liza?
That's a great question.
Would they have become more politically aware, more determined to fight not just for their own freedom, but for the freedom of others?
I think we see hints of that already.
Right.
Julie's compassion for other slaves,
Mm-hmm.
her understanding that this isn't just about her individual escape,
Right.
but being in Cincinnati, surrounded by people like Coffin, it must have ignited something more.
It must have.
We've been digging into Chapter 14 of Underground to Canada.
It's amazing how much Smucker packs into this one section, isn't it?
It really is. From those tense mountain escapes to the intricate workings of the Underground Railroad.
Mm.
And now we're leaving Julie and Liza right on the doorstep of Levi Coffin's home in Cincinnati.
It's like they've reached a whole new level of this game.
Yeah, right.
One with higher stakes, more players.
And the danger feels
Oh, yeah.
even more palpable now.
Definitely.
It makes me think about Cincinnati itself during that time.
Okay.
It wasn't just any city. It was a hub on the Ohio River, a dividing line between North and South, with all these conflicting ideologies clashing.
Exactly. You had abolitionists like Coffin working tirelessly, but also pro-slavery sympathizers, bounty hunters, this
Right.
whole system trying to maintain the institution of slavery.
For Julie and Liza,
Yeah.
arriving there, it must have been a sensory overload, not just in the sights and sounds,
Yeah.
but in the very air they breathed.
Totally. And they're coming from this rural isolation, right?
Right.
Where danger was often a matter of whispers, hidden movements.
Exactly.
Suddenly they're thrust into this urban environment where the battle lines are much more visible.
That's a big shift.
It's a huge shift.
From individual survival to something more political, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. They're no longer just escaping.
Right.
They're entering a space where the very idea of slavery is being debated, challenged, fought against on a grand scale.
Which is exactly what makes Coffin so fascinating.
Right.
He wasn't just hiding people away.
Mm.
He was actively trying to dismantle the system itself,
He was.
using his wealth, his connections,
Mm-hmm.
to chip away at the foundation of slavery.
True revolutionary.
He was a thorn in the side of the establishment, constantly facing legal challenges, accusations,
Yeah.
even violence directed at him and his property.
It was dangerous work.
But he never backed down,
Never.
which made him both a hero and a target.
Absolutely. And this contrast is important.
Yeah.
We see the kindness of individuals like the old man with his cart, then the organized efforts of Jeb and Ella,
Right.
and now this almost legendary figure of Coffin standing up to the powers that be.
It's inspiring.
It shows the multifaceted nature of resistance, how it adapts and evolves depending on the circumstances.
Right.
There's no single right way to fight for justice, and each act, big or small, contributes to the larger goal.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
But amidst all this, it's important to remember that Julie and Eliza are still young girls,
Very young.
carrying the trauma of their experiences.
Absolutely.
How do you think their arrival in Cincinnati would have affected them?
Imagine being surrounded by people who are not only sympathetic to your plight,
Yeah.
but actively fighting for your freedom.
It must have been incredible.
It must have been a validation of their struggle, a sense of belonging they hadn't felt before.
Absolutely.
But also potentially overwhelming,
Right.
to see the scale of the problem they were facing.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
And what about Coffin himself?
Okay.
We've heard about his reputation,
Mm-hmm.
but how would they have perceived him?
Right.
Was he a savior, a mentor, or just another link in this long chain leading them towards freedom?
That's the beauty of Smucker's writing.
Yeah.
She leaves those questions open for us to ponder.
It's true.
We see glimpses of Coffin through others' eyes, but the girl's own impressions are left unsaid,
Yeah.
allowing us to fill in the blanks with our own interpretations.
It's an invitation to think critically,
Right.
to imagine ourselves in their shoes.
What would we have felt, hoped for, feared upon reaching that grand central station of the Underground Railroad?
And that's where Chapter 14 leaves us, poised on the edge of a new chapter.
Literally and figuratively.
The journey is far from over, but there's a sense that the landscape has shifted. The game has changed, and Julie and Liza are no longer just running.
Right.
They're actively participating in the fight for their own liberation.
Powerful stuff.
This deep dive has been incredible.
It has.
Uncovering these layers of meaning in every scene, every character.
It's amazing how much is packed in there.
It's a reminder that even within a single chapter, we can find a wealth of insight into history, humanity, and the enduring power of the human spirit to fight for freedom.
I love that.
So keep exploring Underground to Canada.
Yeah, don't stop now.
And see what other hidden gems you uncover.